Hello there. Okay, then I'm going to do a little bit of medical vocabulary. Seems appropriate given the situation. I'm stuck at home. Expect you are too. Okay, then now we're going to have a look at vocabulary here, which is related to some, medical stuff. Particularly the difference between germ, bacteria, and virus, which I didn't really know, to be honest, until I did some research. So I'm going to try to pass that on to you. So what's the difference between germ, bacteria, and virus? So look at germ first. Does it have a good or a bad meaning? Maybe that's the first place to start. I think you can say basically the germ is a very kind of generic word. It's an ordinary word. It's not a scientific expression. There are scientific expressions have the same kind of meaning, but germ itself isn't scientific. It's just an ordinary word, everyday usage. Just various different kinds of very small living organisms. Harmful? Yes. And very small. Generally speaking, with its ordinary everyday usage, it kind of means something bad and very small. How small are they? How small are germs? Well, they're too small to see. Microscopic. They're very, very small, too small to see. They're microorganisms, which basically means they're too small to see. So micro, very, very small. Organism, a living thing. Okay, so I mentioned organisms in this talk. That's what it means. Microorganisms. So a microorganism is a very small living thing. Straightforward. Okay, now you could say germs are harmful microorganisms. That would make sense. Generally speaking, they have a kind of a bad effect. But this bad meaning of germ, actually, to say germs are, use the word germ to mean something that's bad. This is quite new, actually. It's a kind of a new usage. And originally, germ kind of had a good meaning, at least not bad. So germ, for example, originally meant the same as bud or sprout. What's that? Bud or sprout. And you get the word, for example, the verb germinate. Right? That's where it comes from the same root. To kind of sprout or to bud, to germinate. So germ, that kind of the root of the word had a kind of good rather than bad meaning originally. And germ still has a good meaning sometimes. Think of any examples. Not many examples, but there's a few. We talk about wheat germ. Yeah, that sounds a bit scary, but it's not really. It's something very good. We can say the germ of an idea. The germ of an idea. Again, it sounds a bit scary maybe, but it's not. It's it's a good thing. So it could be the germ of a great idea, right? So it's not bad at all. It's good. So basically, you kind of get the sprouting or the budding of an idea. So kind of good meanings here for germ. The beginning, the bud, the sprout. You can have an example like that. She has the germ of a great idea. Bit of a funny sentence, but still. But of course, when we use the word germs, generally speaking, it has a negative meaning. It's an ordinary, everyday expression to mean very, very small, living thing you can't see that causes harm. And the word germ as a generic word for harmful microorganisms goes back to 1871. So it's quite recent, actually. And you can get that information from one of my favorite websites, Atom Online. The expression germ warfare, for example, using germs to fight people, goes back to about 1919. Okay, that's a bit of history. If you don't want to use the word germ, you want to use a more scientific expression, you can say pathogens, although people generally don't use that. Pathogen has the same meaning as germ. So if you want to sound very clever and scientific, you could say pathogen instead of germ. Just sounds more scientific. Pathogens are harmful microorganisms. Germs are harmful microorganisms, same thing. Just sounds a bit more scientific. Let's give you some examples of germs. Are bacteria germs? Is a bacterium a germ? Well, bacteria may be germs. Right? Some bacteria that are harmful, we would regard them as germs. So some bacteria are germs because bacteria are microorganisms. You can't see them. They're very tiny things which you can't see. However, many bacteria are not harmful. Okay, so I'd say most bacteria are not germs. Okay then, so most bacteria are harmless. They don't cause us harm. And the reason they're harmless is that our immune system kind of deals with them. So you can say that our immune system protects against bacteria. And many bacteria are actually useful. In fact, we would die without bacteria. If there were no bacteria in the world, we wouldn't be able to live. We need them. So certainly bacteria, you can't say they're bad. Some of them are, but generally they're not bad. And they may be very, very good. Now, some bacteria are harmful. You could say certain species of bacteria are pathogenic. Pathogenic meaning causing harm. Causing diseases, I suppose you could say. So certain species of bacteria cause diseases. One example of that would be cholera. That's a bacteria and it's pathogenic. It causes harm. So the cholera bacteria. Okay, so let's consider bacteria in the context of antibiotics. Antibiotics, I expect you've heard of that. You could say that antibiotics are effective against bacteria. Don't forget that not all bacteria are bad. Antibiotics may kill bacteria. Antibiotics may stop bacteria growing. Obviously, you've got to be careful. You shouldn't overuse antibiotics because we need bacteria. Some bacteria are very good. So don't overuse antibiotics. Be careful. Okay, so what about virus then? We hear virus in the news all the time now. Talk about one virus, two viruses. Compare that with bacteria. It's one bacterium, and two bacteria. So bacteria is plural. Virus is singular. Viruses, bacterium, and bacteria. Okay, then so virus. The word virus basically doesn't have a good meaning. That may be a slight exaggeration, but I think we can say, generally speaking, the word virus doesn't have any good meanings at all. Virus is originally a Latin word, so the word virus, in the form of virus, has a history of thousands of years. And in its original meaning, it means poison. The meaning changed over time. So in early 18th century, 1728, it was used with the meaning of infectious disease. Again, I got this information from Etym Online. I recommend it. And you get the word or the expression computer virus from about 1972. So again, not a good meaning. Very difficult to imagine a computer virus having a good effect. It's not impossible, I suppose, but difficult to imagine. So again, a virus is a microorganism. And in fact, viruses are much smaller, generally speaking, than bacteria. So viruses are microorganisms. A virus is a microorganism. And antibiotics are not effective against viruses. One reason for that is because viruses aren't really living things. It seems that scientists generally agree that viruses are not actually living organisms. They need other living organisms to grow and reproduce. So most scientists agree that viruses are not really living things. It's difficult to define that, but that's generally agreed by scientists. And viruses are generally much smaller than bacteria. Take the word replicate, so to produce a copy of yourself, to reproduce. Bacteria can replicate themselves. Given the right conditions, they can replicate themselves. They can produce copies of themselves. Viruses can only replicate themselves inside other organisms. Generally speaking, viruses have to actually invade the cells of other living organisms and replicate themselves inside the cells of other organisms. So viruses grow inside the living cells of other organisms. And viruses can infect all life forms. In fact, viruses may even infect bacteria. Surprisingly, viruses may even infect other viruses. May even infect other viruses. So viruses attack the cells of your body, and viruses may weaken your immune system. We've covered that vocabulary, so be careful. Wash your hands often and well. Wear a mask. Come to think of it, I don't have a mask. But I do have a bandana. Here's my Valflore bandana. That's going to have to do. Avoid large groups of people and don't go out unless you have to. Okay, so take care. Hope that was useful. Here's a fun fact. Some bacteria have little tails so they can swim around. And if you look at those tails, they often look like mini motors. You probably don't believe me, but here you are. Here's a bacteria with a tail. And look at that tail. There's a model of the tail. It actually looks like a little engine, like somebody actually, built that. And lots of scientists say, how could that evolve in the natural world? Remember, these bacteria are really tiny, microscopic creatures. Anyway, that's a fun fact. Take it easy, look after yourselves, and I'll put this up as soon as I can. Bye-bye.